Hey there, Chris Brown here, part-time hobo. You know what every hobo, one time or another, wants? Their own train. Yep, imagine not having to wait all the time. You could be in charge of your schedule and take it where you want to go if you only had your own train. Now, that's kind of hard to do, but that's what this old hobo and three other buddies wanted to do in high school, and by gosh, if we didn't go out and do it and build our own train. Yeah, back in high school, my buddies Dan Ford and Stewie, Mark Stewart, and Scully, Tom McIntyre, were all sitting in lunch one day, and we've been hopping trains for, well, a couple of years now, and down along the river, and yeah, it was fun and dangerous, and even got caught once, grandly got caught. But we wanted our own train. And so, what did we set out to do? Build one. And in order to do so, we had to think about what's it going to take to build our own train. Well, first we had to know how wide the tracks are, do our research, went to the World Book Encyclopedia and found out that the gauge of tracks in the United States is 4 feet 8.5 inches wide. So we're going to have to get some sort of an axle that was that wide at least. Then we needed wheels. Well, certainly we couldn't have the giant train wheels. We need to have some smaller ones. And where are we going to get those? Well, maintenance vehicles, they have smaller wheels, as you can see, but no, not small enough. So, what are we going to do? First thing we figured out, well, let's go out to the old train yard on the west side of Green Bay, look around, see what we can find in the junk pile, and maybe we'll find something. So that night, take my parents' Ford Squire station wagon with the paneled sides and head out to the other side to the train yards on the west side of Green Bay, and lo and behold, here isn't a pile of train junk as we entered past the no trespassing sign. In that pile of junk were 2 axles with 2 small sets of wheels, the kind that I think was strapped to the front and back of maintenance vehicles, just sitting there in a junk pile. So we decided to help them out and get rid of the junk for them, and we had our train wheels. So we took it back to Dan Ford's parents' garage, and his dad was rather sick at the time and wasn't out in the garage much, but we covered it up with some blankets. Next step, how are we going to connect these train wheels together? Well, down at the local lumber yard, they also had a junk pile, so the next night we went down there and relieved their junk pile of a couple of 2x12s that were going to work just fine. Back to Ford's house. 8 bolts later, we have ourselves a train that goes on the tracks. Well, that's good and fine. You can push it along, and it weighed about 150 pounds by this point in time, so it's pretty heavy. But we want more. We need this thing to run on its own. We need a motor on this. So we find out that our buddy Bill Bush, his dad is selling a old 5 horsepower lawnmower that had a side mount, what do you call it, gear sprocket. So we bought that from him for, I don't know, 20 bucks. Take that back to Ford's garage. Now, how are we going to put this thing onto the train wheel? Well, Stewie's brother was a welder. And he was a young 20s, and he had his own welding machines, and he agreed, yeah, I'll get yourself a bicycle sprocket. I'll weld it onto one of those wheels for you. And that's what we did. And Stewie's brother welded that, threw it in my parents' station wagon at night, covered it up, drove it over there, and he welded that sprocket on there. Back to Ford's garage we go. Now we put on a sheet of plywood, put on the side-mounted 5 horsepower Briggs & Stratton. Thing actually came with a little clutch system. Bingo. Have a train. And it weighs about maybe 175 pounds, but we have a train that can run on the tracks. So we take our first test run. This is about October sometime in our junior year in high school. We take it down to the tracks next to the river where we'd been hopping trains for years. We knew the schedule that after 5 o'clock no trains would run until the next morning. We had all evening. Man, darned if it didn't work. Oh yeah, sure, the chain flew off a few times, but we took that up and down those tracks, and suddenly we could see people watching. Who are these, all these kids that have been hanging around here? So we had to be kind of careful, go out after dark. But we did it a few times. But where are we going to store this thing? That was the biggest problem. We knew we couldn't keep it in Ford's garage forever. Couldn't be hauling it around all the time on top of my parents' car at night, covered up. Well, unfortunately, it was kind of hard to store down near the river where we were riding it. So we put it on top of the car and took it out about a mile away to some farm fields and spent 2 days digging a big ditch and building a place to plop it in there. And maybe 2 or 3 more times we took that thing out. But we were juniors in high school, and we were also interested in girls. And darned if all 3 of us or 4 of us didn't get girlfriends, and then homecoming was coming up and we wanted to go on dates, and that train, we took it out 1 or 2 more times, but then it stayed in that ditch out in that field, and we never did it again. And suddenly the farm was sold and became a suburb, and never found out what happened to that old train of ours. But we built our own train, and that's every hobo's dream. Wish we could have had more adventures on it, maybe taken it down further. Probably lucky we didn't. We might have come to some grand misfortune. However, we built our own train. Don't know what happened to Stewie. Don't know what happened to Scully. Both very good friends. Scully had many adventures with him on the road later on. Unfortunately, Ford, I just found out, passed away a couple months ago. And so this is dedicated to Dan Ford and the train we built in your parents' garage. And by gosh, that was one hell of a train. Well, there you go. That's one more hobo story. And till next time, safe travels.